Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are and when you're seeing us. This is Alex Brahim, Director of Fundación El Pilar Foundation in Cúcuta, Colombia, in the border with Venezuela, and also Director and Curator of the project Juntos Aparte, kilometer 4941 of Bienal Sur, Biennial of the Global South. We are now finishing the 2025 edition of a project which started in 2017 as a response to the crisis in the Colombia-Venezuela border and the Venezuelan massive exodus, from which Cúcuta became kind of the headquarter of the response. We, as civil society, have come through with this project since then. We were working as an encounter of international thought and borders through three editions, 2017, 19, and 21. We also launched the virtual channel 2020 during the pandemic times. And then since 2023, we became a transnational platform of citizenship and arts creation and research. We have since then been developing not only projects here in the border between Colombia and Venezuela, but we have also toured abroad with our exhibitions and with our methodologies of pedagogy. We're now having an really impressive final cut for our program and for all these years of response, dialogue, and coexistence since and within the Colombia-Venezuela border. And it's Annalee Davis from Barbados who is visiting us for this virtual conference or conversation. We will first of all have an introduction about her for you to know. So Annalee Davis is a Barbadian visual artist and writer whose practice combines history and biography in discussions of post-plantation economies with cultural activism in the arts sector. Davis's works explore Barbados's transformation from once biodiverse landscape to sugar plantations and more recently a tourism-dependent island, both arguably sectors of enclosure and exclusion. She understands the plantation as an economy model irrevocably impacting the contemporary environment, whose historical legacy has been traumatically inscribed upon the landscape and its people. Working in her studio, located on an operational dairy farm once a 17th century plantation, Davis exposes the polyvocal narrative buried beneath the land, drawing, walking, making bush teas, and growing living apothecaries. Her practice suggests future strategies for repair and thriving while investigating the role of botanicals and living plots as ancestral sites of refusal, counter-knowledge, and healing. A Caribbean activist nurturing more equitable platforms for emerging artists, her work as the founding director of Fresh Milk and co-founder of Caribbean-linked Targeting Axis and Sourgrass promotes pan-Caribbean community engagement by working with artists across multilingual archipelago. Collectively, they reinforce the healthy growth of contemporary visual arts in the region by working with artists who often feel marginalized from the mainstream society. So we were first to start by screening her film On the Map, which is a documentary film that exposes the reality of crossroads in the history and contemporary society of Barbados and explores the sense and the idea of creolism and creole. Then we will be back to Annalee and have a small discussion with her, not only about the film, but also about her work, her trajectory, and her points of view and perspective on the role of visual arts in a city like Barbados.
one of these days I'm going to write it and call it My Daddy. Now, my mommy wasn't really Scottish, you know. She come from Tobago, she was a true Tobaganian. And my daddy was half Scottish, half Welsh, half African, half Chinese, and half Amerindian. Was a full-blooded Trinidadian. But I always used to think he looked like a Malaysian. But you see, so no amount of political correctness could dilute my inspiration of being a full-blooded, true stereotypical West Indian. I had the other day to fill out an American census form. You know, they have boxes where you tick off who you are. Me, Asian, tick. Hispanic, tick. Native American, tick. Black, tick. White, talk. I like your mouse running up the clock. And to top of the pot, my grandchildren, like Emerald, the TV chef, knock it up a notch. Bam, Portuguese. Bam, East Indian. Bam, Brazilian. La 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 da da da.
With the exception of a relatively small number of Amerindians, Caribbean people have all come from somewhere else, across the Atlantic, into the belly of the Americas. And so it was that the Caribbean was born.
And then I saw, or rather heard it, the pebbles of the pan, the plangent syllables of blue, the unrolling syncopation, the rhythmic tidaletics. And it was the island's own sound, not taken or borrowed from nowhere else. Or if borrowed so creatively, it becomes our own. And the irksome wonder, why so long? Why did it take so long? Take me so long to come to this? So natural, so obvious, so beautiful, so easily our own. 𝗖𝗍𝗄𝗏. So that when God created the Caribbean, He took a pebble, skidded it along the water with a sound of our own, and this is how it went. His archipelago, my vision, your poem. The stone had arced and bloomed into islands, Cuba and San Domingo, Jamaica and Puerto Rico, Grenada, Guadeloupe, Bonaire, curved stone hissed into reed, wave teeth fanged into spray, Bathsheba, Montego Bay.
Yeah, man. Your mama guiding me now? Nah, man. Going down the road for a lime.
At the time of producing this documentary, 12 Caribbean countries are creating an open economy called the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, CSME. Article 45 stipulates that member states commit themselves to the goal of free movement of their nationals within the community.
Going down the road for a lime. Real old talk. Just chilling, cooling it. Yeah, we. Papa, yo. You alright? Nah. Going down the road for a lime. Real old talk. Yeah, man. Nah, man. Yeah, that's sounding real good. Your mama guiding me now. Just chilling. Cooling it. Yeah, we. You alright?
Then Her Royal Highness stood to declare the Federal Parliament inaugurated.
And members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Representatives, I now declare the Federal Legislature of the West Indies to be inaugurated. I will now read the message of Her Majesty the Queen.
Unlike the experiment of federation in 1958, the CSME is an intergovernmental arrangement between sovereign states. But does current leadership demonstrate the right to lead the economic integrative process? Are these nations developed enough to be responsible social partners? Or is the driving force simply to increase profiteering among an already existing elite? Characterized by waves of migrant experience, the Caribbean became one of the world's largest experiments in hybridity. Themes now fashionably debated in first world academic centers, ambiguity, doubleness, creolization, and globalization, had their matrix in the Caribbean. And what about intra-regional migration? In 1977, political activist Walter Rodney noted that there were 3 waves of migration from Barbados into Guyana between 1835 and 1928, as planters required imported labour because of the unavailability or intractability of local workers. Barbadian immigrants were strongly resented as economic competitors. Rodney states that as the Indian population in Guyana grew to outnumber the Afro-Guyanese, debates on immigration shifted. Afro-Guyanese now portrayed Barbadian immigrants not as competitors, but as allies in the struggle against Indo-Guyanese dominance. Threatening to some, the CSME is only an economic attempt to regularize what many migrants have been living for quite some time.
We were the responsible inheritors of the region's genetic irresponsibility. My fair skin, part English, part African, part Portuguese, Guyanese mother, used to say to us children with an amused, ironic smile, "Never mind, my dears, that on your head black pepper grows. You all have lovely teeth." And my black Barbadian father, equally amused, would reply with a twinkle in his eye, "Division of labor, Dorothy. You supply the teeth, I supply the black peppers." And then they would laugh at the racial folly of the colonial color code.
So what do Caribbeans have to say about the CSME and Article 45, which speaks about this free movement of people?
Do you have anything to say about CSME, partner and common integration? CSME, have you heard of CSME? So what do you think about the discussion that's going on about integration? It's a good idea? Why? Why do you think it's a good idea?
I got a major friend, right? He's an economist. He was working here at my city. He did the job, and he again working at 17. 125,000 US dollars a year, tax free. He's a very intelligent man. So I want to see what the plan out with Guyanese.
No.
And he direct down there. I only had 35 times in 3.5 years.
Would you have family from around the Caribbean? Is your family completely Barbadian?
Barbadian.
Yeah. So you don't think there's anything positive about the whole region being able to, like, you can get on a plane and go to Trinidad or St. Lucia and live and work?
Trinidad burn out more than you can't see today the burn out down there. You don't want that here, they will burn you up too.
Right, okay.
Historically, the Caribbean was a free movement area. Under the colonial system, and this is remarkable, under the colonial system, you could travel throughout the whole Caribbean on a schooner without a passport, without checking through immigration or customs, enter and live.
I only see win-win. I see win for the company, for the organizations. I see three wins. Win for the organization, win for the people, because surely if you're earning more money in any country, you can have a better standard to live in. And three, I see win for the country, because now the countries will be more balanced in their labor force, regardless of area, because we can move wherever we need to.
I think the problem, though, is one that can be come at from another angle. For example, a leading Jamaican intellectual who spends much of his time in England these days, Stuart Hall, says that what we need to do is to rethink the nature of the relationship which we share with one another, a relationship obviously of difference. And it seems to me that once you start to think not in binary terms, but in terms of a relationship of difference, then the chances are that we can rethink how we relate to one another. That's a more fertile direction to go in, much more productive one. And it will allow us, I think, to abandon earlier notions of identity, ones that are inherited via colonialism.
I am the complex Creole. My context is the Caribbean. An archipelago crocheted into a crossbreed of carnival, class, and commerce. Cognizant of Columbus and the Commonwealth that created these confused colonies, correctly criticized for the callous treatment of the Amerindian and the reconstitution of a Caribbean caste system. Several centuries later, my coronary artery crackles when I think of the creatures that created this cacophonous confusion. And although we collide, there is more chaos than community. Some feel like foreigners, as though uncharacteristic of these now ex-colonies, our natural native islands. I celebrate the chorus of the Creole chant.
It was about 6 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning. It was about 5 o'clock, and we heard banging on the door. People saying, open up, police and immigration, police and immigration. My uncle get up, open the door. When they came in, they came with about 2.5 crowbars, saying that if we didn't open the door, they would have ripped it open. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, so we were still asleep. So when we opened the front door now, they came in. They said open the back and the side door. When we opened them, there was 2 of them outside at the back, 2 at the side. They started saying, bring your passports and documents, bring your passports and documents. We took them out. It was myself, my uncle, my aunt, and 3 cousins that live in the house. All of us have papers. The children have student visas. We brought them out. They took them, put me to sit down on the chair. They went in the rooms, started tumbling it, check under the beds, open the wardrobe, take out my aunt's clothes, saying that people could hide in here, that Guyanese like to hide.
But my experience as an attorney has been that there's great resistance to the movement of people. So there is the policy that the CSME represents, and then there's a deviation with the real practice. I mean, you've seen it in Barbados, and I see it a lot here in Trinidad. Immigration officers are very reluctant many times to admit even legitimate visitors to Trinidad and Tobago. And there's a great deal of resistance to people from outside of Trinidad and Tobago coming to work here. There's a great deal of nationalism here, where they want to keep the jobs for Trinidadians, and so even when the skill is not available in the country, many times we have difficulty getting a work permit.
There's only one immigration officer, and the rest was all police. When he came in, he rechecked the documents. When he finished, he told my uncle that he was very sorry, because everybody in the house has papers.
Well, I think the CSME, Annalee, is a very laudable objective in terms of the integration of the Caribbean as one economy. So I think there is a great deviation between practice and what the intent of the CSME is.
The CSME region comprises 6 million people with a combined economy of 60 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars. So why do we even need the CSME? Can the CSME protect people who migrate in response to a lack of access to proper education, suitable employment at home, and a lack of social and financial security? Why are Caribbeans moving in undocumented ways throughout the region?
Well, I leave my country hoping that it would be a bit better here because things was tough back then. I had 2 kids to support. I can remember when I first came, I started working as a carpenter and I was only earning about $250 a week. And other carpenter told me that they were getting $100 a day and so on.
As things stand right now, the Guyanese workforce in Barbados are just taking jobs which are there, which are vacant. There's a growing construction sector here, hotels, housing, and so on. And in fact, many of the big hotels and new hotels in Barbados have been majority built by Guyanese labor. So there's jobs there.
Yet, despite CSME, current immigration laws don't allow for persons other than citizens of their own country to contest an incident involving immigration officers.
For instance, I have friends I know who gone back to Guyana. Some of them work with people, and Wednesday, Friday afternoon, you should receive pay. Instead, you see the immigration van coming, you've been picked up and sent back.
And look at the events of Terrible Tuesday, when Guyanese nationals were denied entry at the Barbadian border.
The events of Tuesday, July the 19th, 2005, first of all, is not unique. What's unique about it, perhaps, is the numbers that were sent back. But Guyanese being sent back or being put to sit on a bench at the airport, or now with the modern airport, being put in a room, is nothing unusual. But on Terrible Tuesday, as it's called, or that entire day, 91 passengers came from Guyana, and 35 were sent back. On BW 604, 26 came in on that flight in the evening, and 21 were sent back. Now, that's a very unusual statistic, and one has to wonder what could have happened. But so many persons on a flight, very different persons, unrelated, different backgrounds, different reasons for coming, were nevertheless sent back. Some of the cases that were reported include, for example, a businessman and his family who came here, had his hotel booked, had US $4,000 on him, and yet he was asked, where did you get the money from? And he was sent back. Another case involved minors coming to Barbados to visit their mother, who is married to a Barbadian and who actually got her citizenship on the 20th of July, the next day, when her children were sent back to Guyana. Another case involves a lady who came here to attend the wedding of her sister. Another one involves a lady coming to visit her husband, who is legally working in Barbados. And another example is one I can speak of personally, is my niece who came to visit me, and she was also sent back.
Late in 2005, in response to Terrible Tuesday and other similar events, 2 Guyanese performed a skit at the first water break of a cricket match between Guyana and Barbados in Guyana.
Well, a bit of extra entertainment there for the patrons. I would say depicting a fairly regular occurrence in the world of travel nowadays in the Caribbean.
I think the Guyanese authorities are concerned about this Bajan. They probably think that he's coming in with a bit of magic to try and steal this game away from Guyana.
Do we, as independent nations, continue to perpetuate the attitudes of the mother country towards regional people who don't belong in our territories?
It's very scary in the sense that you're always wondering if something's going to happen. You're not free in the sense that you feel as though you're in a mental prison. But on the other hand, it's a risk that I'm willing to take, in the sense that I have a job, I'm working, I'm saving, I'm making sacrifice. And it's a sacrifice that I'm willing to take right now because I'm young. But it is very difficult to be in this position.
Political janissaries, ill-informed, ill-educated, ill-mannered opportunists whose philosophy of life cannot reach above the level of the groin, who pretend to champion the people, fed on a diet of the bold and the beautiful, while their leaders shine iridescent as dragonflies, hovering over the stinking cesspits of corruption and corruption and pollution, which we flush daily into our sludge-colored rivers. Islands emptying their slop into the blue Caribbean, which washes it up like a poisonous curve on all our beaches, into all our church-infested villages, into all our lives. The ship that will not let us go, but prevents us everywhere.
And at what expense do we move? What happens to the family unit?
My last son was born when I leave home, he was 7 months. And sooner or later he's going to be 6 years. And I'll be going back for the first time.
Human, I come to you.
But I have a creed that I wear like a crest on my chest. My credentials are that I am created equally, credible from my cranium to my coccyx. I cleave to no church, temple, nor country. I sing the canticles and practice a yoga. I breathe,
breath,
I chant. I made my japa and wrote a creed. I owned a crucifix and acknowledged the crescent. I anoint myself with a communion of cinnamon, coffee, and cumin, cocoa, cotton, and cane. It is with composure and compassion that I conceive my compatriots as compatible, whether Cuban or Guyanese, Christian or Muslim, Hindu or Jew. I contemplate a Caribbean conservatory that is a consanguineous, conscious community, confidently confirming a conglomerate who speak patois, papiamento, Spanish, and Creole. I celebrate the chorus of the Creole chant.
I come to you.
It is possible for you to obtain a permit out of the legal system. It's not safe in the sense that you might give somebody your money and your passport, and they might lose your passport and take your money, and then there's nothing you can do about it because you're not legal. You can't go to the police because it's a risk that you're not willing to take. I would like to say that being illegal is scary. It is hard.
Caribbean countries reveal some of the highest immigration rates in the world. an International Monetary Fund working paper, indicates that the Caribbean has lost 10 to 40% of its labour force in emigration to first world countries. 89% of Guyana's tertiary educated workforce has left. The lack of opportunity at home means that taking the risk to try elsewhere, even with the danger of being coerced and exploited, is worth a try. Human trafficking signals coercion and exploitation. Less emotionally, however, it refers to transnational work, sought out by people who migrate to look for work opportunities. And how do we think about ourselves as a community?
I guess the first thing that I should address is myself as a people and a region. They say I'm white, but I am not a European. I'm not an African or an Indian or a Chinese or an Amerindian or a Syrian or anything coming down in between. I'm none of these, yet I am all of these. I am a Caribbean.
My ancestry is from India, and that's a few generations ago. But I feel, although I have the pride of the ancestry and what and the richness of it, I feel very much a Caribbean person because I was born here.
You know, the average Trinidadian has, you know, a Grenadian grandmother and a Vincentian grandfather. I do. You know, my grandmother is Vincentian and my grandmother is Grenadian and one from Venezuela. So we are people, one region. Build. What came out of that experience was the whole thing of building a region and building a regional consciousness. You know, we are separated here. We could jump on a plane, jump on a boat, but to cross that line here is the harder challenge, and it's something that we need to keep in mind always.
Everybody now build our country, build our family, build our society, build a new humanity, build.
Let us imagine a different Caribbean space.
As a complex Creole confronting this crossroads of centuries, I cannot condone the corruption, nor those who configure conflict. I outcast them from community. I contradict the universal way and commemorate the cobweb we have become. I come to you not as a comedian, nor as a clown. I come to you as a coalition of combustible matter.
I come to you.
A civilized collective, sometimes caustic, but never counterfeit. I am a cordless creator of culture, conveying my codes to a community that isn't convinced of the credit of cultural producers. And now I wear a coronet, a continuous circular. In my cipher, I chuckle, I weep. I celebrate the chorus of the Creole chant. I am a Caribbean.
I am a bird. I am a bird. I'm Caribbean.
it's a pleasure to have you here in Juntos Aparte, Annalee Davis. Most welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a long road to make it here, so we will take best advantage of this time. I will ask Annalee a few questions on her trajectory, her work, her perceptions and points of view about certain stuff that kind of link us together. And we will start by, indeed, the work on the map. We just had the chance to see the film, and it very much exposes a point of view, a perspective on Creole culture. So I would ask Annalee, what are your thoughts and your conception of Creole culture, and most especially, what are your thoughts on its relevance and its pertinence nowadays?
Thank you. So Creole can be a very tricky term, but I'll start with 𝗂𝗪 Brathwaite's definition. 𝗂𝗪 is a Barbadian poet, and he broadly defined creolization as a process that took place within a tropical plantation context, and that it was a clash of African and European cultures that caused friction, but it also was a creative force whereby one culture would absorb another culture, and that there was a measure of reciprocity where there was intermixing and enrichment between cultures. From the perspective of the Caribbean notion of creolization, I think it's important to understand that creolization is not just about cultural or racial intermixing, but it's evolved out of a very particular set of difficult historical circumstances around the forced abduction and migration of people from all around the world to the Caribbean to form part of this evolving plantation society that benefited Europe largely. And in terms of your question about its relevance today as a concept, I think that you're seeing conversations in the art world happening about creolization, and that the Caribbean has produced a number of philosophers who've written about Creole culture, and their ideas are currently very influential, and they're being referenced by curators in the contemporary art world. For example, the French Caribbean thinker 𝗬𝗿 𝙀𝙣𝙩𝙖𝙣𝙠 has been enormously influential, and there are many references to his work and his thinking in the contemporary art world today. I can think about a few exhibitions where 𝗀𝙀𝙀𝙀's thinking about the Creole has been very influential or inspirational. So there was the Poetics of Relation exhibition at the Perez Art Museum in Miami, curated by Tobias Ostrander. The Nigerian curator 𝗀𝗍𝗄 used 𝗀𝙀𝙀's notion of creolization in Documenta 11 in 2002. And Hans Ulrich Obrist at the Serpentine often mentions that he reads 𝗀𝙀𝙀 daily, considers him a mentor, and that he has integrated his way of thinking, both I think about creolization and archipelagic thinking, into many of his projects and conversations. I guess in the wider current geopolitical environment, where patterns of migration are increasingly complicated, because of war, because of the climate crisis, the economic precarious situation that many people find themselves in, possibly the notion of being creolized as articulated in Caribbean discourse may continue to offer strategies for thinking through these shifting demographics in contemporary society, because culture is living and breathing and continually shifting, and creolization suggests that nothing is fixed, nothing is permanently defined or determined, and that the way we interact with and understand one another is constantly shifting. And I think that that's what this notion of Creole thinking is about.
Well, thank you very much, Annalee. That really sets up a framework in which one can conclude that it's been more present and since longer than its most recent boss, in a way, right?
Very much so. Yeah. These discussions have been happening in the region for decades. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the region. You come from Barbados in the Caribbean, a not so big island, but pretty much a place of crossroads. We come from a border, the Colombia-Venezuela border, a dry border, although it's a line that is drawn by a river, at least at this side of the border, at this part of the border. What is it like to conceive? How does the concept of border operate in an island, or at least in Barbados?
So I would say that it operates in several ways. Barbados, in one way, is defined by its territorial border that demarcates our very small landmass. It's 21 by 14 miles in the Southern Caribbean. And in some ways, this may feel kind of restricted, that these are dimensions that define limitations as a small nation state. But on the other hand, we can also imagine that this perimeter acts as a threshold within the archipelago of islands that share a very specific history. And so this kind of porous border, this includes initially the genocide of indigenous people, the imposition of the colonial project by European powers and their kind of single language, the development of the plantation project that was powered by European and Indian indentured labor and African enslavement, and the monocropping of sugarcane. So these borders were constantly being penetrated. And we know that indigenous people came from South America. They traversed the waters of the Caribbean in their canoes for trade and for fishing. And later, the Europeans established more kind of formal ports and harbors. So the ocean became this kind of permeable maritime highway for trade. So the borders here of this island were really a kind of a global crossroads, which saw trade in wine from Madeira, textiles, arms and ammunition, building materials, luxury goods like crystal and glass, industrial machinery to power the sugar works building and the windmills that were all coming from Europe. And now today our borders are being crossed daily by millions of tourists that are arriving on cruise ships, by people coming in on planes. And Barbadians and Caribbean people have a history in the pre-independence, post-independence era of being migrant populations, both across the region as hucksters and higglers, and then moving voluntarily for education and for employment to North America. But also at the turn of the 20th century, a third of Barbadian men went to Panama to help build the Panama Canal. More recently, we're seeing people going to, in the kind of independence, post-independence era, people going to the United Kingdom, to Canada, the US for jobs and for education. So I would say that our borders are very permeable, and yeah, in the ways that I've suggested.
Well, thank you. It's certainly a very different kind of conception and operation for a border and for a crossroads. And it's very significant that you did not only mention the people who have gone to or through Barbados, but also the way in which the Barbados diaspora has happened, which is also very telling about, even if it's always countries have more people who are immigrants or than those who leave the country, but I would say that almost any country in the world shares this condition of people from elsewhere coming in, but people also from there going elsewhere. Which makes me think of our next question. Barbados is a well-known name as a Caribbean island, as a tourist spot, but one could tell that it's not as much known, an idea of a Barbadian culture, and even more, the idea of a Barbadian contemporary art scene. What can you tell us about it, about Barbadian culture and contemporary art in Barbados?
So, I mean, my field is as a visual artist, and so that's the lens through which I see and understand the place. I came back to Barbados in 1989 after I'd done my master's at Rutgers University in the United States. And it's here where I began to work professionally as a visual artist. And Since that time, I've seen the artistic community expand. It certainly feels more robust now than it did in the early 90s when I came home. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that we now have tertiary level institutions that offer degree granting programs. So you can get a degree, a bachelor's degree in fine art or visual art, so that local people can access their tertiary level education here and not have to go overseas. Secondly, the proliferation of artist-led initiatives like Fresh Milk in Barbados, of which I'm the founding director, and other artist-led initiatives around the region have really helped to shape an art community and to foster opportunities for artists to contact one another and to link across the region. I'm noticing that that more students that are graduating from Barbados Community College are staying in the field than they were 15 years ago. In 2011, when I established Fresh Milk, there was almost 100% of artists graduating were not staying in their field within a year. And now I can say that that is changing and more artists are staying in the field. So there's no shortage of talent or ambition, but the wider ecosystem is deficient. It's not fully functional. Like, we don't have a National Art Gallery, we don't have a Contemporary Art Museum, so we don't have these established institutions that can acquire work, display the work, research on the work, produce scholarship. There are few grants. There are more today than there were 10 or 15 years ago. So it's a economically difficult field to be in. But in terms of ideas that artists are grappling with and responding to, there are a lot of artists responding to the existential crises of our time. You may know every year we have to live through the hurricane season for 6 months from June till November. Our oceans and coastlines are home to more and more sargassum. Our coral reefs are threatened. There's perpetually this notion of the exotic and paradise are being reckoned with by artists. So there are ideas that are being sort of grappled with about beauty, about celebration, about performance alongside wider kind of societal issues around mental health, gang violence, failed leadership, gender issues, the impact of technology, the use of technology by artists. And these are a lot of the challenges that we are confronted with and what artists are responding to in a variety of ways, with humor, in defiant ways, intelligently in different media. So I would say that the art sector is healthier now than it has been, and certainly there are increasing numbers of people that are choosing to stay in the field.
Well, that's not only good news, but also news that we can somehow relate to from here, from Cúcuta and the Colombia-Venezuela border, and from the Juntos Aparte project. That's been also challenged through the years in order to, achieve better practices and to have a more professionalized field in a place where, like ours, we're not only a very peripheral place, but we're also one place lacking a university with an arts program. So we have an arts education program, but not an arts program. That makes a difference.
Yeah.
And also this condition of periphery has also allowed us to become attractive, let's say, to certain conversations and certain agents. And that has allowed not only the project, but the art community here to establish a much wider scene to relate to.
Okay.
So I think that an island and a border like ours, which is a periphery, do share a lot of conditions.
Yes, there are things
in terms of like historical blend and also like deficiencies within the system. But I think that's the reason why it's so important that people like you stay where you are and develop the kind of work that you have been developing in the last years. Well, already a lot of years. And that leads me to our last question. I cannot recall the exact year now, but a few years ago, there was this book of yours that came out, published by 𝗕𝗜𝗘𝗏 in Costa Rica, called On Being Committed to a Small Place, acerca de comprometerse con un lugar pequeño, for those who are following in Spanish. And I would like to ask you, Annalee, what is the idea behind that statement? What can you explain? Those who haven't read the book yet, this is also an invitation for you to get the book and read it, because it's a very, very nice book to read. And so what's that idea of committing to a small place, or being committed to a small place, about?
Thank you. So it was published in 2019, as you said, On Being Committed to a Small Place. It's a compilation of 6 essays and a conversation with the editor, Miguel Lopez, who was the chief curator and the editor at 𝗕𝗜𝗃𝗏 in Costa Rica. And it was really an opportunity for me to reflect on what it means to make art and be an artist in a post-colonial Caribbean context, and in this post-independence and now post-republic era. And I was writing about how being an artist gave me a platform to interrogate the nature of the space, the small island post-plantation society, and to understand that my art practice both gave me a way in and out of the small island, a way to belong, a way to contribute to and be a part of Barbadian and Caribbean society, and to find ways to accommodate circumstances, or to create more accommodating circumstances for my fellow artists through my work at Fresh Milk. I speak about my choice to return to Barbados from the United States and commit myself to this small place in this very particular region, which is where I wanted to build my art practice. It sometimes seems silly or counterproductive to want to do that, given, as I said before, that we don't have a national art gallery or a contemporary art museum. So most of my work is shown outside of Barbados rather than here, even though my work is very much grounded in the place where I live. But I never felt connected to the US as a long-term space. I don't have ambitions to live in Europe, and those were not the places for me. I also tried to articulate in the essays the disappointment that we can feel as citizens towards small places that we love deeply and that we care about, and that we can have a lover's fight with these places because we love them so deeply and we want more from them. And that in spite of the disillusionment that I can feel at times, it remains very clear to me as I get older that my art practice and my work as a cultural activist, these are like my rudders or my anchor. They are the controlling forces of my life in this place. And I have chosen to remain and to actively belong in this small place. And even though I feel sometimes the commitment is not reciprocal, but to do what I can in this context, which is to promote platforms for conversation, for sociability, for critical exchange, where art can reimagine our history, shape civil society and the public sphere, imagine more possible futures, and that this is the place where this is the place where I'm committed to and where I will continue to make my work and build my life.
Well, Annalee Davis, that has been very touching to hear, because one could say that every single word we have just heard from you are exactly the ones one could say about the idea of returning to a place like here, one that one deeply loves, the one that one holds a love and hate relationship with, commitment that might sometimes, several times, not be fully reciprocal or not even slightly reciprocal sometimes, but still we are here. So yes, it's been really an honor to close the whole of the programming of the Juntos Aparte project, which started in 2017 as part of Bienal Sur. We are the kilometer 4,941 of Bienal Sur. Since 2017, we have walked this road together with them since we started. And this is our very final public action before we start just compiling and going for our archives and for a final book production. And I think this is a really, really golden closure for everyone who has followed or who will have the chance to follow us from now. Thank you very much, Annalee Davis, and very, very best wishes for much luck and full success with everything you're dealing with and your horizons for Barbados.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I really appreciate being a part of this program, and all the best to you and all the work that you're doing as well. Thank you, Alex.
See you, everyone. We keep juntos aparte. We keep bien al sur. Seguimos juntos aparte. Seguimos bien al sur.